Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Gaming Society's online conference. Today's conference will touch on accessing worldwide capital. I want to start by introducing myself. My name is JD, I'm the VP of Biz Dev for the Tech Society and the Gaming Society. For those of you who might be new to us, the Tech Society owns and operates the Blockchain Society, the Cannabis Society, the Entrepreneurship Society, the PropTech Society, as well as the Gaming Society. And what we do is deal-making conferences for executives and investors across these verticals. And last year, we've done 120 physical and virtual events ever across the world. So we've been doing all these online conferences since the end of Q3 last year pretty actively. Our model has evolved to try to make it as interactive as possible for everyone participating and speaking. So we welcome feedback. We're making some changes on an ongoing basis so that these provide more value for everyone. So at the end, if you have any feedback, whether positive, negative, we welcome them. We want to try to have the best experience for everyone. So talking a little bit about today's conference, we're going to touch on accessing worldwide capital in different markets. You'll see a schedule here. We'll have all the speakers introduce themselves for a short introduction and then dive in to the discussion. The discussion will go on for about 90 minutes. And with this, I want to introduce our sponsor for today and who will be moderating our discussion, Reese Island from MNP. I want to thank our sponsor. If it wouldn't be from them, we wouldn't be able to do these. So with this, I will pass it on to Reese.
There we go. Now we're talking. Hi, everybody. So first off, just want to thank the Gaming Society for organizing this event. Of course, to all of our panelists for taking the time out of their schedules. And of course, to all the attendees to join in the conversation today. So my name's Reese. So I'm a partner in the assurance and advisory practice at MNP here in Toronto and specializing within clients within the technology, media, and telecom space. So a little bit about background about MNP for those of you who may not be as familiar with the firm as others. So MNP, we're Canada's 5th largest professional services firm now, just over 5,500 people across the country and about 80 offices now. So really take a step back and you look at what's the key difference maker for MNP compared to some of the other professional services firms in the space. And it's really our focus on the mid-market and companies in that startup phase, working very closely with entrepreneurs. So as a full service firm, we really provide our clients, it's a one-stop solution, really no matter what stage of your business is in. So to kind of give you a bit of a flavor, I'll kind of, run down a bit of our suite of services. Of course, there's probably way more in here than, that I'll have time to touch on, but just to kind of give you a bit of a flavor. So really the core of our practice is on the assurance and accounting. So clients often needed by their banks or other investors to have their financial statements subject to a review or audit. So a large part of our practice is providing that type of assurance engagement. From a consulting point of view, we help our clients a lot with refining their business strategies, developing investor pitch decks when you're going out to raise capital, and really advising on process transformation to make your business run as smoothly as possible. Corporate finance, help you out with raising capital, any sort of due diligence procedures that you need to do, or looking to acquire new businesses. That easy segue into business valuations. Kind of fast forward down the road, we help out with succession planning, and we have a full family office services suite. Cybersecurity and technology solutions is actually a large part of our practice as well. And so from a cybersecurity point of view, it's really helping clients to safeguard not only just their customers' information, but really the information of the company itself. Keeping bad actors at bay and keeping all of your corporate assets safe. So this is really gets into anything penetration testing, PCI compliance if you're dealing with customers' credit card information, helping to develop overall IT governance strategies, or simply performing just a basic health check, kicking the tires on your IT environment and kind of letting you know where gaps might be. On a tax compliance perspective, do a lot of tax compliance and structuring work, not just from a Canadian point of view, but also cross-border. So whether you're looking to expand south into the States or overseas, we can help develop the most efficient structure to do that. Or vice versa. If you're currently in the States or overseas and you're looking to come inbound into Canada to acquire a business or to set up operations here, we can we have those teams that can help structure that that operation in the best way possible. Maybe one more here, keeping an eye on my time here. Also cloud-based accounting solutions. So we're really, this is an alternative for companies that maybe you don't want to be having your own in-house accounting team. So really a great thing about this is it provides you quick access to all of our in-house professionals, as well as that whole suite of services that I kind of touched on. So again, I probably skipped over a couple of our service lines in this quick intro, but really the main takeaway, M&P, we're your go-to advisor, really no matter what stage of business or what challenges that you're currently facing. I'm sure that a lot of people who are joining in here today, you're either business owners or you're in a role where you've been tasked to help the business kind of challenge in this unique environment that we find ourselves in with COVID-19. So maybe a good resource for anybody on here, M&P has created a COVID-19 Business Advice Center. And this is available to anybody, whether you're an existing client or not. It's available through our main landing page right on mnp.ca. And this provides daily, if not more frequent, updates about all the government stimulus initiatives, how to access them. So that's like the wage subsidy, the work share program, as well as short-term borrowing options through BDC, EDC, and some of the other commercial banks. So again, access through M&P, or of course you have my contact information here through the Gaming Society. Feel free to reach out if you need any kind of pointers or directions in that space. So that's M&P in a nutshell. Kind of cram a lot into 4.5 to 5 minutes there. But so maybe as a next step here, kind of pass the baton over. We'll do a quick intro from each of our panelists. Just a quick kind of 20-second intro from everybody, and we'll kind of work our way down. So maybe we can start off with Arwina from Beam.
Just so you know, Arwina is going to be a few minutes late, so we have Michael that can introduce himself first.
Perfect.
Michael, you can talk whenever you get the chance. You have 20 seconds.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Shortino from Waveform Entertainment. Waveform is a full-service e-sports solution agency with offices in Montreal and Toronto. We produce events across North America, and some of our broadcasting and agency work is really around the globe. We help clients from ideation to execution with all verticals of esports. Some of our big clients include DreamHack, ESL, PGL, Ubisoft, TGS, Enthusiast Gaming, Team Liquid, Team OG, and many more. Feel free to visit our website, waveform.gg, to learn a little bit more about our verticals.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Maybe next, Christian from Canaccord.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Scrow. I work in equity research at Canaccord Genuity and cover the technology sector there. From a research perspective, we've been actively following esports for 2 years now, and I've written numerous reports on the market and investment opportunities. And so I'm excited to be here today and to share my 2 cents and learn a little bit more about the space.
Perfect. Thanks, Christian. Next up, Nick from Purpose Investments.
Yeah, great, thanks. So I'm Nick Mersch at Purpose Investments. I'm an associate portfolio manager there. Purpose is an $8 billion asset manager. There I run 2 funds, the Purpose Global Innovators Fund, which is a tech fund, as well as our hedge fund. I also sit as a director on a family office. It's my family office. We've made probably in between 8 to 10 investment into esports specific space after looking at over 200 decks. So that's it from my end. Thanks.
Awesome. Next up, Aaron from Playline.
Hey guys, Aaron Abruskin here from Playline. I'm a co-founder there. Playline's a sports gaming and entertainment platform with really strong early stage growth metrics. We have a product that meshes the skill and excitement of fantasy sports with a prizing mechanism akin to the lottery, a company I founded alongside a couple of well-known athletes, and I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic, thanks, Aaron. Next, Chris from Organized Gaming.
Hi, how are you? So my name is Chris. I'm actually part of Organized Gaming through Amuka Esports. I've been now working with Amuka Esports as the VP of Business Development. Past work with Amuka Esports as Organized Gaming as the project manager. Organized Gaming is a content organization as well as a lifestyle brand. Sorry, I've thought I was representing a different company here, so I'm just going to pass the torch on.
No worries. I think it'll be a good segue to Ben at Amuka Esports.
Yeah, hi guys. How's everyone doing? My name is Ben Pfefferman. I run Amuka Esports. Our mission is to create local esports hubs, so really building esports communities, starting in Toronto, and we just opened another location in Windsor, and we're looking to grow the physical gaming space across North America.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Next up, we have Khaled from Wave Gaming. Maybe.
Khaled, I think we're having issues with your mic.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. All right. My name is Khaled. I am the co-founder of Waves Gaming, one of the largest esports arenas in Canada. Currently, I'm the chief operating officer of Amuka Esports. My main goal right now is to build synergies within the Amuka Esports portfolio and make sure that we're bringing the Canadian esports community the best and greatest gaming experiences out there.
Fantastic. Next up, Howard from Mackie Research.
He seems to be on the line, but I think his mic is muted. Howard, are you there? Oh, there we go. Oh, your mic is muted.
Oh, okay. One sec.
There you go. We hear you now.
Okay, great. Hi, Howard Katz at Mackie Research. Run the small mid-cap space in the technology sector. I've been focusing on the e-gaming space for about 2 years now, and looking forward to be able to contribute to the dialogue here.
Perfect. Thanks, Howard. Next up, we have Jackson from Convoy Partners.
Hi, everyone. Jackson Vaughn here from Convoy Ventures. We're a early stage venture fund focused exclusively on esports and video gaming, specifically around the technology and infrastructure side. Really excited to hear all the other panelists and participate in the conversation.
Awesome. Next up, Josh Wong.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Wong. I'm a VP with JEGI. I've been doing investment banking for about a decade, starting with Scotiabank in the Diversified Industries Group before going to New York with Morgan Stanley. Currently with JEGI, leading coverage in esports. Just for your benefit, JEGI is a New York City-based M&A-focused boutique covering TMT with a global footprint. We specialize in live events, marketing agencies and services, data analytics and technology platforms. A large percentage of our deals are founder and VC-backed businesses looking to up-tier to institutional capital and engage with strategics. I'm looking forward to speaking with all of you today.
Awesome, thanks Josh. Next up, Ian from Pearson Yates.
Hey guys, Ian from Pearson Yates Ventures here. We've been pretty heavy in doing early stage investment for the esports and gambling worlds for the better part of the past 4 years. We've done everything from leading the seed round in a pro team to investing in gambling infrastructure companies targeted within the esports world.
Perfect. Next up, Paul from Cividian.
Hey, I'm Paul. I was a very successful serial entrepreneur, VC for a while, managed a venture fund called Garage, and now have a thesis around investing in building companies in the esports space. I've been a hardcore PC gamer my whole life, and I think have a little bit of a different view on the space than most. I also co-host the Business of Esports podcast. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Next up, we have Garrett from Falk Ventures.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's healthy and well. Really realizing that my beard is woefully inadequate comparatively, but so it is. So I manage the venture activity for the family office of David Falk. For those who aren't familiar with the name, David had a long and successful career as a sports agent, most notably representing Michael Jordan his entire career, along with Patrick Ewing, Dikembe Mutombo, Allen Iverson, Boomer Esiason. The list goes on and on and on. We are getting involved in esports in a major way, which we can talk about a little bit later. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Garrett. Next up, Stephanie from Trimosphere.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Crosby, Transfer International, based in Montreal and New York. And then I spearhead a company called Acceleration Equity as well. So we're a private equity fund, and we invest in sport and entertainment. And lately, we have a very great interest, and we're building infrastructure for esport as well as other ventures.
Sure, thanks, Stephanie. Next up, Josh Chapman.
Hey everyone, this is Josh Chapman. Partners with Jackson on Convoy Ventures. Again, early stage VC fund focused on the picks and shovels of video gaming. We have 12 companies in the portfolio, and yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. We have Neil Malbone in Collegiate Sports Management Group.
Thanks, Reese. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be on this panel with all these distinguished people. I'm Neil Malvone, Executive Vice President of Collegiate Sports Management Group. I head up the esports vertical for the company. We are in our B round investment stage. We represent over 125 different colleges across junior college and four-year colleges, and looking to hear from you guys about investment opportunities for sure.
Fantastic. And so just checking in, did we have Arwina join in from Beam?
Arwina is running a few minutes late, so I'll just make sure to let you know, Reese, when she joins, as well as Ben. We're just having some technical issues and trying to get him online.
Okay, no problem. Well, I think, so that's our list of panelists here. I don't believe I've missed anybody. If I have, anybody jump in, but I think I've got everybody on the list here. All right, perfect. So I guess, yeah, we can kind of start to dive in. I think the idea of the discussion here is we kind of start off looking at investing in esports from a Canadian perspective, migrate into the US, and then land off in Europe to wrap things up. So before we kind of dive in, JD, was there anything else you needed to add in before we get rolling? I think we're good. All right. So maybe getting things kicked off from a Canadian perspective. So what I'll kind of do here, just in terms of format, is I'll kind of pitch a question out to a particular individual to just to kind of get the conversation started. And then from there, if anybody else wants to kind of chime in and lend in their perspective, by all means. And but we'll try to have everybody take the lead on a question or two here as we kind of move through the conversation. So looking at Canada, I mean, right now, obviously, you know, it's a term kind of overused right now, but unprecedented times by all means, with COVID-19 on top of everybody's mind. So maybe looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the esports environment, maybe get things started off with Christian from Canaccord. And just, you know, we've seen a bunch of examples where we've seen a real kind of uptick in the gaming activity within esports now that, you know, physical distancing and a lot of people staying at home. So maybe you could talk about what you see in terms of the surge in gaming activity and what this could mean for the esports sector.
Right. With COVID and shelter-in-place measures, intuitively it makes a lot of sense that people who are stuck indoors are playing more video games. I think I'm guilty of that a little bit. But the data points are everywhere that support this. Major publishers like Tencent are seeing massive increases in revenue and daily active users. Viewership on Twitch and YouTube gaming have both seen spikes in recent weeks. And even telco providers like Verizon, they've reported that gaming usage has been up 75% during peak hours in the US. So bringing this back to esports, I believe these trends were already underway, where gaming is becoming less of a hobby and more of a lifestyle. And these quarantine measures are only really accelerating that trend. So for esports companies that are in one way or another tied to engagement across platforms, I think this will be a tailwind.
Very cool. Is anybody else want to add on to that thought? about looking at the surge in gaming activity and the impact on the esports sector. If not, we can kind of fast forward into some brighter times ahead. You know, when kind of look further down the road once COVID-19 is behind us and physical distancing is a past memory. I'll throw this question over to Michael at Waveform, and really looking at the development of esports arenas. And so, Michael, kind of get your thoughts on what are the necessities of building out a scalable esports arena.
Sure. So I have a couple points here based off of gaming stadiums or esports arenas. I've been a part of the development of 2 of them really so far. So I'm sorry, I know a little bit about what it kind of takes, but in essence, emphasizing on your revenue model is very important. Making sure that everything is thought out and feasible. Developing strategic partnerships, so developers, endemic brands, non-endemic brands, suppliers, those make a huge difference. Think outside of the box. New angles or concepts wins views. Obviously, you're fighting for a lot of the online space or viewership, so uniqueness is key. Something else is nothing is forever, thinking for the future. Pretty much what I mean by that is keeping things modular. Things aren't set in stone, new games arrive, player configurations change. The difference between, let's say Rocket League, a 3v3 compared to an Overwatch, which is 6v6. There's some variations in terms of stage design. So keeping things modular and understanding that nothing's set in stone. Proper infrastructure, this stuff goes overlooked so much. Having proper rigging requirements, power, internet. These are things that, you never know when someone would like to use your space or contract your space and has additional requirements that are out of your norm. Saves you a lot of money and hassle down the road of having it there from the get-go. And then the big thing that goes overlooked is it's one thing building a beautiful stadium, but investing in the personnel in that space is key. Operations are key. Operations, pretty much, that's the first experience for the attendees and creates the experience. Hospitality, players, pro players, and even amateur players are influencers. They love sharing good, positive experiences. So making sure that these people have a good time. And, technical staff, super key. Having professional guys that know what they're doing really showcases your final product. At the end of the day, you can have a beautiful place, but if it doesn't execute flawlessly, it makes it feel amateur. So those are kind of the headline points, which I think are important of building a scalable, strong esports arena.
Oh, perfect. Now, can I toss that out to the group? I know, Khaled, that this is also a space that you're involved in. Perhaps you have a couple of thoughts you'd like to add in.
Yeah, no, for sure. Michael really hit it on the nail. We've worked on a few projects together, and yeah, Waveform definitely knows what they're doing. On top of everything that he already mentioned, understanding the goal of your arena, right? Whether you're building a casual hub similar to the Hive in downtown Toronto, or building an esports hub similar to what we're trying to achieve with esports in Toronto, or something similar to the gaming stadium in Vancouver, right? It all depends on what you're trying to achieve with your arena, and making sure that you're building these necessary aspects of the arena in order to facilitate any type of event. Like Michael mentioned, being able to build an infrastructure that can withstand, the ever-changing industry in terms of equipment, hardware, and being able to change it up in a day's notice. Modularity would be a key word here, being able to transform any type of arena into whatever your client needs, right? And ultimately, the most important thing is the people, having technical individuals, having production crew, having individuals that understand the space, being there 24/7 is key for the success of any arena.
I've seen a bunch of these business plans for dedicated esports arenas, and I just don't get it. The business models don't make sense. No one's making money with these things, right? Like these multi-million-dollar dedicated esports arenas. The reality is they're vanity projects funded by a lot of dumb money that's in the space right now. And you would think coronavirus would restore some sanity to that. And I don't know if it will, but I love, I'll connect it to the last question, which is you know, how are we adapting? I hate the word that esports has had to adapt. Like, I just hate that. I hate hearing that. The reality is we should never have had to adapt, right? We invented the automobile, and for years, we've been building railroad tracks to drive our automobiles on. And like, it blows my mind that, like, why are we building physical arenas when we're a digital product to begin with? I get there's some niche market for that, but like mass building of esports arenas for millions of dollars, like, makes no sense to me.
I just want to jump on if I can, Paul. Yes, you're right. Esports venues don't make a lot of money, but the industry in general doesn't make a lot of money. I don't think it's necessarily to single out the venues, but I think we have to look at the goal. Is the goal, you know, a place like HyperX, it's amazing, it's so cool. Is that a sustainable business model? Does that support and foster community building? And I think that's the goal of gaming venues, is to build and to support the local communities. So to that extent, I think they've been successful at bringing people together in ways that sort of online gaming hasn't. And I think that's the role we have to look at the venue moving forward.
I'd just like to add a point in terms of the venue space. I think that a large hurdle with these is they're not scalable models, right? So you can have these one-offs that have pretty thin margins, and that's just the nature of that business. But as soon as you can provide some sort of scalability, I think that's where it gets interesting. So I think if these individual sort of locations start layering on content strategies, and then they start leveraging that proprietarily created content onto a larger network, that's where you can finally get scalability outside of that isolated ecosystem. So that's just something that not too many people have done successfully yet at this point, but I think is an area for where you can start to layer on, whether it's a different channel on Twitch or just another avenue on VOD content on YouTube, another just sort of layer to build up that brand on an individual location basis. I think that's an untapped kind of area that I think we should see some growth in.
I just think fundamentally every $1 million we spend building an arena is $1 million we're not spending figuring out how to truly innovate the audience experience. We're lucky that we have a digital first product that no other sport has, and no other sport can ever have, realistically, not anytime soon. And you know, no one's innovating there. No one. I haven't seen anyone, right? It's all just let's build arenas and have people watch big TVs. I just think it's really kind of a lame effort.
You know, if I could just sort of jump in and pick up on that, if you look at the sort of the public market and you see how the different stocks have performed sort of post-corona, I mean, the differences are stark. If you look at all the, you know, gaming stocks like Activision, EA, you know, Microsoft to some degree. I mean, yes, they've experienced some pressure, and but again, if you actually look at them sort of like 6 months ago to today, they're actually either up or a little bit flat. In contrast, if you look at sort of the bricks and mortar entertainment venues like Cineplex, for example, or MGM, or, you know, Stars Groups, you know, those stocks have almost been cut in half. So I think, you know, if anything, this recent pandemic, you know, for better or for worse, has sort of highlighted the differences between you know, online and bricks and mortar, and where I think the future is going to be going over the next period of time.
I would just like to chime in on one comment on that as well. On the positive, you know, from a user experience, nothing beats a live event, or in my eyes. I think from a user experience perspective, you know, you can always watch a movie at home, but certain movies you want to watch in the theater. I think it goes with that same kind of concept that, you know, it's really impressive seeing, you know, a large scale show and the feeling of, you know, crowds cheering and people around you living the same experience. There's certain uniquenesses that you can't get online that you can get in person. So I think that there will always be a live event component, but I think what it comes really down to is that too much onus is put on building the facility rather than building the content or the relationships with developers or suppliers, or, you know, really the endemic brands, bringing just cool, unique things to the venue. At the end of the day, a brick and mortar place is only as good as what you put inside of it. And I think that is something that usually goes overlooked. People, spend too much time, money, resources on building the building and not what's necessarily going to be done post-opening. So I think that is something that should be looked, but nothing is as important as, the content goes. At the end of the day, that's what you're competing against. When you go on Twitch, you want to see what's the most exciting. It could be, just your favorite game, title, things that happen rarely, or just, new and creative things that are happening. So content is the difference maker in my eyes on that stuff.
And if I could just jump in, Michael, that's an excellent point. Our company has hosted several collegiate national championships in live venues, and I can tell you that the crowd interaction, the player interaction is so much different than what you see on the Twitch channel. So I don't know what the cost of building a dedicated arena would be, but I can tell you just from, renting convention centers and places like that, the live event and the live content that we're creating is definitely drawing crowds. And so I don't know what the business model looks like from a big arena perspective, but from a college perspective, building small arenas on college campuses, I think has already shown to be very successful.
I think one additional comment around the intersection of capital here is, if you look at esports, a lot of the first capital into esports was angel money from the sports world. And then the next generation of that, about 3 or 4 years ago, was family offices that own sports teams. So a little bit more sophisticated, more institutional processes of capital. On the back of that, and this is something that's really exciting, is then the VCs started getting involved, right? Then you get some of the Silicon Valley and LA and New York VCs that wrote small to large checks, whether you're talking about a startup or a team, right? And now what's starting to happen is esports companies are starting to go public in the last 18 months. Small, very, very small micro cap stuff, but now you're starting to awaken a completely different tier of institutional capital that's saying, wait, can esports support a $300 million commitment? And that is attracting a lot of the real estate interest, right? And so I think that the real estate interest is never going to, the real estate managers that are managing, $5, 10, $15 billion are never going to look at an esports team at a $40 million valuation, $10 million check. So an esports arena is one way that they're able to get exposure. So it's not, the way I look at it is that this isn't an either or, this is actually a maturation of an entire asset class into an institutional AUM base that we've kind of seen over the last 5 years. I don't think that esports dedicated arenas can support 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people sizes. I think we need to start smaller, because I'd rather those be packed out at 200, 500, 800, 1,000, like every single night with community events, which I think this starts to blend really quickly with just gaming in general, not just esports. And so I think that's something that I think we've all seen and experienced the last 5 years, that a real estate investment group is never going to touch an esports team, right? Or a startup, but they could do a $50 million arena. That's just.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good point, because obviously from a social aspect, having that face-to-face interaction, I think really kind of brings that community factor together. And to your point, Josh, when you're mentioning, from a capacity point of view, if folks on relatively smaller sizes would really cater to the amateur esports organizations, which are a really important aspect of the ecosystem. So that's going to be our next topic, and I'm going to lean on Chris for his comments on that.
Sorry, Reese, sorry to interrupt.
An announcement there.
Thanks, Reese. So Ben from Esports Agency actually just joined us, and I wanted to give him a chance to quickly introduce himself to everyone.
Just here is Ben from Esports Agency, one of the guys from Europe. One of our biggest clients that we're working with is FC Bayern Munich. I think everybody should know them. And I wanted to say hi and bring the European perspective. And let's keep going.
Thanks, Ben. And quickly, I just wanted to interrupt you. Chris didn't get a chance to properly introduce himself. So Chris, we would love to give you the floor again, just to quickly introduce yourself and your company.
I can segue that with the question. It'll actually work out perfectly. So Reese, do you want to continue with that? Or?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, just kind of touching on the amateur esports organizations and their importance to really fleshing out the full esports ecosystem. So wanted to get your thoughts. Why are amateur esports orgs so important for the esports funnel?
All right, so I got a little thrown off this morning with the first question. So I'm the founder of an amateur esports organization called Shattered Dreams Esports. So we actually work on building talent for competitive gamers and helping with content creators get their brand out there and noticed so that we could bring them into the esports funnel, kind of like a path to pro. So the reason why I think it's important is right now the amateur scene just seems to be untouched, unnoticed. So what we're trying to do is get to that point. So working with esports arenas is one of the main things we do. So we work very closely with Waves, or one of our sponsors. We help fill those venues when we can with our team. So we host events there, we attend events there, we play in events, we practice there. They have a great content area with designed streaming areas. So we get our stream team in there, we do charity events. So it's basically nonstop with that. So I think, I mean, hopefully once more amateurs come out and there's more eyes on it, we'll get a little bit more into it. But I mean, right now it's just kind of getting it out there.
No, for sure. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So I guess maybe kind of shifting gears a little bit, looking from an investment lens and valuing esports teams. Throw this one over to Ben at Amoca Esports. Kind of get your thoughts on what are the metrics that you look at when valuing an esports team?
Yeah, sure. When I saw the Forbes list back in November and a couple teams were at $400 million, I lost a lot of sleep and still haven't recovered. For me, it's hard to really understand, why they're valued at what they are. I mean, I think the Forbes list just really looked at last funding rounds using Crunchbase data. When I'm looking at teams, I really think it should be a multiple on your sponsorship revenue. I think that's the most important source of revenue for teams. I think it's the make or break, and really, prize money is transient, and who knows, sometimes the economics of a game make sense, and then very quickly the economics of a game don't make any sense, and you're forced to drop a roster. So all that prize money that was accumulated in a quarter of the past year really it's not recurring in any way or shape or form. So at the end of the day, I think top esports teams should be valued on sponsorship revenue and their fan base, how they're able to grow it, how they're able to make it diverse across geolocations, across different titles. And in the end, when you look at great brands like FaZe or 100 Thieves, for the most part, they're pretty shitty teams when it comes to being competitive. I can't remember the last time 100 Thieves won a meaningful tournament, but there's hundreds and hundreds of people lining up in front of the Cash App to buy their merchandise. So at the end of the day, that's where I think these diverse revenue streams are going to drive the higher valuations.
Actually, Ben, if I can tag along on that, I know that you and I had spoken about this before, and I know I saw the question. I think Alexander Cheer put on the note here. Teams, especially as far as investment goes, are especially challenged. I've actually had some inbound calls from owners of teams that are looking to monetize, either to somehow, affect their business model to actually make these profitable or get out of the investment. And I actually like what you said in your article. I think you wrote about, ranking the teams ordinarily, not necessarily with value, but at the end of the day, Forbes putting out an article with math based on Crunchbase is a bit tricky. Really, the value is driven by who's willing to buy them at what price. And I'll tell you right now, the institutional, investor market, teams of the esports space, unfortunately, teams is probably one of the areas that's most challenged. And to Alexander's question, with crypto tech and other components of the industry within esports, a lot of the investment currently is looking at what I'd call the teams plus model, or things like infrastructure that are around teams, so not necessarily the teams themselves.
I mean, my views on this are really simple. The teams are just fundamentally bad businesses today. Doesn't mean none of them will succeed. The reality is, though, 80% of them are going to fail. And all of the teams that have traded hands today, if you look at the dollar value, they've either traded hands for the cost of, basically the cost of the spots that they own, whether it's an LCS spot or a, Overwatch League spot. So they're trading for their cost value, or zero, like with Reciprocity, what we're seeing, right? We're going bankrupt, essentially. And the more the dumb money dries up, the more these teams are going to go out of business. That's just the reality. They're all, for the most part, if you look at the top 20 teams, I think only one or two are breaking even, like at TSM that I think is making some money. But the valuations are just like not from this universe. Like a business that sells $1 million of apparel is not worth $300 million. That makes no sense. That's not connected to any reality. It's all hype today. Now, if you're wanting to bet on teams as an investor, I think the only way to do it today, if you really wanted to, and I'd recommend against it, is you buy all of them, right? If you have a basket of enough of them, inevitably one or two of these will get really big, and it might pay off the rest of the failures. But the reality is they're, for the most part, all really bad businesses.
And so maybe we dive a little bit more into, like, on the metric side. I know Aaron at Playline here. So as a skill-based fantasy sports gaming platform, one of the most investor-friendly metrics that you like to boast is your US dollar $25 cost to customer acquisition, as compared to your Fortune $50 customer lifetime value. Cost of customer acquisition, something that applies to everybody who's taking part here today. And so want to get your thoughts, explain why you're able to acquire customers at this particular price point. And additionally, beyond the revenue that you derive from these customers on the platform, what other leverage or use cases have you found for your database of the gamers?
Sure, thanks. So, customer acquisition really is the lifeblood of my business. Taking a step back, Playline, as you said, is a skill-based gaming platform. We offer real money gaming products. Important line or distinction to draw, and maybe for the benefit of those who don't have as much familiarity with the current landscape of sports betting or gambling, both in Canada and in North America. So as many of you probably know, sports betting was federally legalized in the United States in May of 2018. Individual states are now in the process of enacting legislation to govern that process. To date, about a quarter of US states have some legislation in place. However, from that quarter, only about half presently offer online sports betting operations. So it's still a very fragmented and young market. In Canada, conversely, sports betting is not federally illegal. However, I understand that it is very close to becoming legal, and now it's not a matter of if, but when. So that's right around the corner, and I would surmise with all the money that the government's putting out there, to support small businesses and the like, we could see the legalization of sports betting sooner than later, as an effort for them to recoup some of that money. So that's sort of what's coming down the pipeline. Now, from a Playline perspective, as I said, we offer a skill-based gaming product. We ask users to predict the stat line or play line of a group of featured star athletes in that day's games, whether that be from traditional sports or esports. The more correct stat predictions one makes, the more they win, up to and including our $1 million top prize. So again, customer acquisition is paramount. And we've had a great success with that in our 2.5-year run with over 300,000 registered users. We've done that two ways, one of which is through a network of social influencers we've cultivated, which gives us access to 50 million sports-minded followers at the click of a button. That was further strengthened by our recent acquisition of a sporting community on social media called @NBA_memes. If you're on Instagram, check it out, @NBA_memes. 3.6 million followers and some of the highest engagement you'll see in the marketplace. I'm sure many of you saw the recent deal between Penn Gaming and Barstool Sports, whereby Penn Gaming made a $160 million plus investment at Barstool, valuing them at over $450 million. Now, of course, Barstool is more than just Instagram and or social media. They have a cross-medium brand. However, Instagram is still quite important, the most important social platform we find for customer acquisition. So if you were to compare NBA_memes to Barstool Sports, you'll see that NBA_memes, while they have half the followers, is actually growing at a more rapid pace and averages more than, say, 100,000 likes per post. So if anyone is doing any customer acquisition through social media, I would caution you not to focus strictly on things like follower counts. Really look at things like engagement. What are the average number of likes and comments per post? What you're looking for is engaged communities. So for Playline, to own a community of that magnitude allows us to more regularly present potential users with our brand messaging in an entertaining and not advertising fashion. Let's find a way to get them to engage, predict the stat lines, win prizes, and things of that nature. Secondarily, partnerships. Find groups who provide underlying events that your primary business will serve to enhance. So an example of that is Playline has a partnership with NASCAR's Speedway Motorsports Group. They own 8 of the major tracks on the circuit. We are their official fantasy sports gaming partner. So, you know, the thing for NASCAR, and I think this applies to our discussion earlier, they have a major data issue. 75% of people who go to their tracks leave no digital footprint. Playline is a digital first product. Fans go to the racetrack, and with Playline, they can predict the finishing position of 8 drivers in a given race. The more they get right, the more they win, up to and including that $1 million prize. So we are now converting registered users at a high clip, which means we now know who they are. We share that data with our partners at NASCAR, so they get something in return. So we get the brand equity of working with a NASCAR, access to sports fans, who of course are fans of football and basketball and the like. At the same token, they get the data. So it's really cross-play there. Now, we had a little discussion earlier about physical esports locations. And it got me thinking. I mean, I've been to NASCAR tracks in Dallas whereby, they have over 100,000, people that can pack that stadium. And they have a Jumbotron that's actually bigger than the White House. So these tracks remain unused for large portions of the year. No reason that you couldn't do, esports types events there. Further, Playline has a partnership forthcoming with the One Toronto Gaming Group, who's behind the casino builds in Pickering and at Woodbine. They'll have 3,500 to 5,000 stadiums at the casinos. Of course, casinos want nothing more than to bring audiences onto the property so that they convert them to gamers. Now, with our partnership there, Playline will control the entertainment aspect and be responsible for managing these venues for the purposes of esports. So these are some of the opportunities I see whereby you don't need to make that physical investment in a physical space, but rather can piggyback off someone who wants what you have, and that's eyeballs.
That's awesome. Thanks, Aaron. And so obviously, cover a lot of territory there and a lot of different intersects within the space. So maybe looking at what are some of the esport investment opportunities. I'll throw this over to Howard at Mackie Research. In the greater scheme of things, the esports still relatively early stage, of course. But which segments of the esports value chain should investors be paying the most attention to from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks. Looking at the space, I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier. I really think we've seen a growing dichotomy between, purely a digital model versus sort of a bricks and mortar model. And just sort of to touch upon a little bit of what was said earlier, I do think there is a place for bricks and mortar. Although, when I look at it, I sort of see it through a model sort of analogous to, say, the traditional theater model, where people would go to see a movie, and it's really like the theater almost became sort of the loss leader, if you will, for the whole movie industry, where people would go in, it would be an event, it would drive interest, but really money was made off of the merchandising and all the variety of spin-offs that would come out of a movie franchise. And really, I don't see, at least at this point, I definitely see there's interest in the games, there's interest in the teams, and there's certainly, focus on that. But, really where I see money being made still is sort of on the ancillary, revenue streams that drive it. So, where do I mean by that? If I look at Enthusiast Gaming, for example, I still think that in Canada, they have a model that makes the most sense to me. It's a hybrid model, so they have digital engagement. They also do have the physical representation by the conferences. So that's a model that makes sense to me. And I think that, you can see that, they just reported, I think on the 31st, their year end, I think it was. And they were showing a good uptick in revenue and just real, business metrics. So they're driving revenue because of their, not just their conference engagement, but also their online engagement. So I think you need to look at that business as a model that will drive investment demand. I think that, I do like the sports betting model, although I'll just sort of caveat that by saying that because, sports have been literally sidelined because of the coronavirus, there's some short-term turbulence there, but I do like I do like sports betting models because ultimately that plays into a well-known area of demand and revenue and profits for any company involved in that space. So the score in the Canadian market context, I thought the score I think was onto something, and obviously they've run into the near-term issue of the COVID pandemic crisis. So I'm not commenting on the viability today, but certainly when I think the market hopefully resumes to a more normative state, you'll see some significant value appreciation in that segment. I do like the game developers and publishers. I think if anything, what we've been seeing in the last little while is that there's been a highlight in being able for investors to be able to tap into models that frankly benefit from this whole distancing phenomenon. And I think that while I'm not assuming that this is the new normal, I think as one of the other panelists mentioned, that this certainly will give a bit of a tailwind and a bit of an acceleration to this. And I think that gaming models where people are basically isolated but yet connected will become certainly the new normal, because this what we're seeing here, at least in my experience, is that people are looking to connect, are still looking to maintain connected. I mean, this whole conference is sort of proof of that. Here we are online via Zoom, we're all connected, yet we're all physically separated. So I think that as a thesis, looking at companies that really benefit from this distancing, not just in today's current environment, but I think longer term, I think this will become even more apparent as we go forward.
Perfect. And I think maybe tie back to our earlier conversation on the teams. Just picking up a question here from the chat. Alex Cheer, thanks for jumping in and offering a question. Just bear with me. I'm going to be reading this off my phone. Sure. Throw it out to the group. But so Alex's question is: would it not be better to work with teams, to work with startups in their business models and ideas, to build and create something that is more sustainable? We understand the scene and where teams stand currently, and we have ourselves changed to the business plan almost 100% since inception to focus in on more of a sustainable and realistic business model. But if there are scared investors that no longer want to invest in teams or organizations because of other teams' mistakes, downfalls, or non-starters, where does the industry stand for newcomers? Do we just stick with the same number of organizations, teams out there for the foreseeable future?
Well, again, I mean, if we're looking at business models, and I'm talking about business models. I mean, even if I compare sort of a traditional sports team model, to the esports model, again, by and large, most sports teams today are still owned by private individuals, right? And there's a reason for that, because oftentimes sports teams in of themselves aren't necessarily profitable, or at least unless they are some of the leading sports teams. But if once you get into some of the secondary markets, profitability becomes a challenge. But certainly it's the ancillary revenue streams that then start to make the entire enterprise more profitable. We're talking about, television rights. You're talking about merchandising. You're talking about all those other revenue streams that start to fit in here. And so it's, in my mind, it's possible that we still haven't seen the absolute maturation of the entire space. I do think that, if you're going to look at a model with sports teams, it does ultimately, benefit to have fewer sports teams of sort of greater notoriety, if you will, or greater recognition than than having, multiple, sports teams. And there's, and that I think is a risk in the e-gaming segment, because it is open to a somewhat of a proliferation, because, you can argue it both ways, but ultimately I'm not necessarily sure what the, ultimate barrier to entry for some of the sports teams are, other than, say, marketing dollars. So, in some respects, fewer teams, I think, would be better to be able to have certain, titles being promoted. And ultimately, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, I think all of this really just, benefits the game publishers and the content providers. So when I get back to an investment thesis, I always find myself reverting back to, like, in this sort of gold rush, who is benefiting the most? It's the people supplying the picks and shovels, so to speak, right? So the digital picks and shovels in this instance, to me, are the game publishers.
Yeah, actually, if I could just bring in some commentary here based on what I've seen. So first of all, taking a quick step back, representing institutional capital, I apologize if this is really basic, but obviously investors don't put money in. Hopefully they want to get it out with a return, right? And so step number one for any nascent space, especially like esports, for institutional capital, is they need to know that they're getting their money out plus something on the back end. And unfortunately, with teams and their economics, a lot of it's going to the game publishers. And it makes it really challenging. If you were to ask a team, when do you think you're going to be profitable, you're going to get a really tough answer. So that, that's the base mechanics. In terms of from a mergers and acquisition perspective, I believe that there needs to be a consolidation, but it's going to be challenging for a variety of reasons. Number one, you can't just smash two games together. Game team personalities, if they're strong in certain sports, is going to make it challenging. But quite frankly, even from a transactional perspective, like I mentioned before, there have been some inbounds for teams that are looking for transactions, and it's all sellers, right? Nobody's looking to buy because the economics, again, on the base fundamentals of investing, are very, very challenging. And so, Paul said it quite succinctly, it's a really tough model to see when you're going to get your money back out or even profitable within the next year. So unless there's some visibility for that, and the economics with the game publishers and the content and the IP makes it difficult to monetize, if you're, it's how am I going to end up with a revenue model that justifies, like Ben was saying, the revenue multiple that you're, for the valuations that people are putting on these businesses. So, until we can find solid answers for some of those basic fundamental questions, getting institutional capital, and that, just to be clear, that's the people writing the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of checks, is going to have a tough time justifying to their investment committees, how they're going to put that money into the space. The one thing I will say, not to be too negative, is that with the institutional investors that I've seen, as well as the large strategics, so from a live events perspective, think about companies like Informa or Emerald Exposition, so the people who run some of the large conferences and events that we attend, there absolutely is interest in this space. I think where people are spending their time is understanding where to put their chips and doing the math and the diligence to understand when the best models will become profitable, and that's where you're going to see an inflow of capital.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. And I guess from the investment perspective, maybe ask Nick, have there been investments that that you've seen as winners in the space, or what's the single best investment that you've made so far in the sports space?
Yeah, for sure. So this debate and topic around the teams is a lot more nuanced than anything. You can't really draw straight lines from traditional sports franchises, right? Because within these esports, you have relegation, delegation systems, you have closed franchise systems, you have open franchise systems. There's so many just different networks. Like Rainbow Six League is probably one of the most attractive ones. There's interesting things going on with Flashpoint, where it's an interesting structure before execution. So I think the talk around teams is kind of where I actually did have one of my best investments, in that I invested in FaZe. And the reason for that being probably the best investment to date is because what FaZe has going for them is their focus is brand, right? And brand is a defendable moat. They know who they are. They generate multiples more than the next team when it comes to impressions, love them or hate them. They're title agnostic. They don't care about a trickle-down revenue share agreement or contingent on prize winnings. They monetize their individual fan better than any other org that I've ever seen. And when they do participate in the franchise system, like we saw with the Atlanta FaZe, they don't even put any capital up. They essentially just lease their brand out to that ownership group, gain an equity stake in it, much lower risk, and are benefiting from all the positive economics in it. They've also got measurable leverage on their platform when it comes to, they just take a streamer, High Sky Tifu, whoever, from unknown to huge. And they have several repeatable case studies of doing that. So I think that if you're looking at the individual investment space, the tech stack is super attractive, but the problem there is you've got Twitch and Discord have pretty much kind of cornered a lot of the use case applications, but there is still a lot of interesting stuff going on there. But when you're going on a team, you got to focus on the brand, right? Because that's really the only transferable asset value. If you go to some other brands that are out there, there's one ownership group, and then since Activision makes you brand differently for Overwatch and Call of Duty, what is a brand, right? It's not transferable between the two, and Activision just kind of corners that market. An interesting kind of use case study here is what's going on with the Flashpoint League in terms of they're giving a lot of the ownership back to the teams. So the reason that I think Overwatch is going to be dead within the next 5 years is because they just forced that. They say, hey, look, we got an esports now, pay $30 million for a franchise fee, and everybody kind of jumped at it. So, oh, this is great. But with Flashpoint, they've got this different sort of ecosystem where there's a lot more buy-in from the individual teams. And then when you have that buy-in from the individual teams, they have the streamers signed up on their platform, and those streamers are the ultimate marketing machines at the end of it, like we saw what happened with Apex. So I think that in terms of the team-specific area, that you have to have much greater kind of insight to the context of that individual league. And because FaZe is not locked into these egregious franchise fees, they have a brand as a defendable moat. They monetize better than anybody. I think that's my favorite investment so far to date in the space. But on the tech stack, there's still a lot of companies that have played that are still early days, where their implications extend beyond esports. So I think those are extremely interesting as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and I guess like you obviously touched on a lot of different things there. Where looking at the business model and business trying to kind of revamp, find a model where you can try to monetize at the end of the day as much as you can in this space. So maybe just kind of wrap up on the last question here before we move on to the US side and kind of throw this over to Christian at Canaccord, just to kind of reflect back on the last year, and not necessarily over the last couple of weeks on the COVID-19 specific, but over the full year. Kind of how has esports business models evolved over this past year?
It's been an eventful year for sure. I think my answer gets at a lot of the themes that were just coming out of the discussion, and that's that when you think of the industry sizings and the Newzoo estimates and how sponsorship is really driving the size of the esports ecosystem, that's where teams, we've been talking about teams a lot, but other esports assets are drawing a lot of value within esports. And so what we've been seeing is where 2 years ago a team would say, look at which championships we've won. Now the trend or the metrics that are being shared are, look at the revenue per viewer, look at the number of viewers, look at how many hits we're getting on YouTube, Instagram, etc., right? And so that's becoming a big trend for sure. And then there's 2 points that are specific to coronavirus. The first is a popular opinion I've been hearing where with a stall in traditional sports, you're going to see people who are diehard NBA fans becoming, hardcore Overwatch fans, and maybe there's no going back after. So I think where teams and other assets are looking for an increase in engagement, again, this is going to be a tailwind, I think. And there's a lot of things pushing people online, pushing things to interact with their friends. Platforms are becoming more and more interactive, and so that's positive. And then the other COVID-specific impact I speak to, and this is a trend that's been changing, is while the event space has become more and more popular, a lot because of what Activision has been sort of pushing along with both Overwatch and Call of Duty. I think coronavirus, no one really knows for sure what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 12 months. But there's going to be a shift back to digital, I think. And there's going to be an opportunity for companies to focus more on monetizing their platforms, on improving the tools that they have, the tools that sort of build and uphold the infrastructure. And you're going to see a lot more tournaments coming up online. And that can enable the amateur space, that can enable a collegiate league where, high school students are at home anyway all day. And I think there can be a surge there, and business models are going to come out of that. So the short answer is a shift to digital in all things, sort of back to the roots. I think that's where it's all going.
Christian, I couldn't agree more with a lot of what you said, especially from the collegiate perspective. We're seeing from our schools, a lot of the traditional athletes are now sliding over to esports, and we've had a lot of community nights across our network where they're playing Overwatch, they're playing Fortnite, things like that, to keep them engaged. Here in the United States, the NCAA has awarded a lot of these student athletes an extra year of eligibility. So they're coming back to college, and we're starting to see them now wanting to be part of the esports ecosystem on the college campuses too. So certainly that's been a big increase and part of the business model we've created at CSMG.
No, perfect. And I mean, obviously, we kind of shift gears here into the U.S. landscape now. But obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, that sees no borders. And so kind of get things started off with you, Josh, at JEGI, and maybe speaking specifically to how has COVID impacted your business in particular and business plans for 2020 and beyond.
Sure, and I think I'll approach it from a capital markets perspective, as most of from the investor perspective, what that really means to us. Just before I get into it, I think the investor universe I work with would readily admit that you guys are obviously smarter in the room, and they're really thinking about it from a capital markets perspective. M&A transactions, usually the way they work is you'll want to go to strategic buyers or financial sponsors, and financial sponsors obviously rely pretty heavily on the debt markets, which are effectively closed. Everyone's sort of wondering in terms of from their perspective and what it means for them and their employees, and that's obviously priority number one. Investment transaction activities is slowed a lot as people can't get access to capital, but I think there's a lot of pent-up demand here as people are getting ready. Hopefully the view is, and I'm sure different people have different views in terms of timing, but when does this start to calm down? When do people need to get back to business and the engine fires up again? So generally speaking, the way the markets are looking now is people are doing the prep work in anticipation for deals to launch once the market opens. And it obviously depends on the business and which stage they're at if they're ready to go. But some deals have been put on hold, but hopefully as the markets open up, lenders will start lending again and M&A transactions will resume. And so I would love to hear from you guys as well. Is that affecting how you, because I know, like, for instance, Amuka and a lot of the names that are on here have done M&A as part of increasing their platforms. So to the extent that you guys have comments, would love to hear from you in terms of how you are seeing things. And I'd love to, I'm happy to pepper with what I've seen in the background as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Amuka there wanted to touch base on that comment.
Yeah, Ben to a panelist. So let's just give her one quick second, and then we'll have Ben to answer your question.
Sure.
Yeah, but sorry, it doesn't have to be restricted to Ben. I mean, this is like within the M&A market, whether it's capital raising for minority or majority stakes, or whether you actually whether you're a buyer or a seller, just trying to think about how you are all putting together your platforms in this environment. And, if you're holding off and I've heard of some deals that have gotten scuttled as a result of this, if things are on hold or if things are canceled, as people get a sense for how COVID's going to play out.
Can I speak here?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll try to put camera too. Okay, hi. So for us, everything has actually altered and changed. COVID-19 is such a black swan effect. We don't know actually where it's gonna go and how long it's gonna go for. So we decided to hold on all our investment for the moment. One of the main reason is also our LPs are really worried about what's going to be the next market. So we were actually going to put money into an arena. Paul won't agree with me, but we actually saw a lot of multi-use for it, not necessarily just for esport, but for other sport as well. And it's also attached to a casino. So we really thought that they had a really nice kind of overview of everything. But now we're just going to alter that for the moment. As far as M&A go and everything, I mean, we're just holding. We just don't know, and I think it's a smarter move to not do something when you don't know than do something crazy. So that's for us for the moment, So that's our perspective.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's really helpful. And one thing I might even mention too, just to maybe catalyze some conversation here, but there's been some assumption in the market, and I'd love to hear from you that, obviously with all esports models being different, some are, some aren't doing as great and some are benefiting. So for example, I'm sure some of you have seen these articles, Blizzard took down their server, I think it was on Tuesday, because there was just too much capacity trying to get into the system as well. I think Steam had doubled the number of logins overnight a couple of weeks ago. So, there are models that do succeed. So I hope I'm not painting too much of a negative picture here. So, to the extent that whether it's positive or negative, if you're seeing some large variance, would love to hear from you.
I can leave a comment on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so our two major divisions that we have at Waveform, one of them is the live events and production model, which obviously is being hit pretty hard. But we also have a broadcast division that takes care of put a lot of the content online at either live events, studio work, even online tournaments. That, funny enough, has seen huge surge. Obviously, all these, a lot of the esports companies and really even non-endemic companies that are wanting to get into this space are obviously wanting to put stuff online. That could be for internal use, that could be for mass marketing, or that could even be just for viewers of these tournaments. That being said, we've had a drastic increase on demands for that. Obviously, very similar to what you're seeing now with these live concerts that are going on, where there's multiple feeds and having some type of a production of a show that rolls out, taking a lot of different feeds and producing something for viewers to watch. That is actually, like I said, has been in high demand. And that is something that, we're actually lucky for us to have continuing as a revenue stream, hoping to offset some of our losses on the production side. So all to say is the broadcasting element, goes without saying, is taking a huge influx of demand from that.
I'll say one comment on this from venture firm. So with 12 investments in the portfolio, we're going to add another 4 here in the coming months here. So we're seeing like basically 3 types of buyers. You've got media buyers, then you've got endemic buyers, right? Like Riot and stuff. And then you've got essentially like financial buyers coming in as well. And, what we're pushing our companies to do is kind of what you're saying, Josh, around this pent up demand that's coming down the pipe here, is we're encouraging our companies to like basically batten down the hatches, control burn, get to profitability as fast as possible. Some of them are in profitability, some of them are razor close, and some of them are far from it, right? It really depends on the growth trajectory of their business model. But we're working with our companies a lot to try to encourage them to get to profitability or as close to break even as possible, so that the power and control and timing is in the hands of the entrepreneur and the founder, not in the hands of, the financial markets, right? And that is something that we really encourage these guys to do, because if you've got, 4 months left in runway and everyone knows it, a buyer is going to push into that and delay, right? And that's a really unhealthy dynamic to have. So for us, this will normalize. The debt markets will come back. Financial buyers will, through investment committee over the coming 2 to 3 quarters, get more comfortable with the macro environment. And there will be fantastic opportunities. What we hope is that, our portfolio and our platform that we've got of companies are in the healthiest and highest multiples in that range, whatever that is, right? I think the valuations are coming down regardless of whether you're a healthy company or a bad company. And that's I think a healthy culling of the esports and gaming herd, of getting the inefficient business models out, the dumb money out, the, inexperienced founders out, and it leaves the best of the best. And that's really exciting for our industry. But that's the way we're thinking about it, from like a top-down perspective, and working with each and one of our entrepreneurs to try to get them there. So.
Got it. That's excellent. I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to make a point, Josh Chapman, that I think you made an excellent point, especially as it goes with M&A processes, especially when you have, macro events that are not your fault but become your problem. Time is not on the seller's side. And of the 3 categories you mentioned, media, endemic, and financial buyers, I'd categorize the first 2 as what we in the finance world generally call strategic buyers, and last is obviously financial sponsors. typically the first group would generally pay a higher price because like anything in the finance world, that, you know, they're able to do something more with the asset than just a financial buyer. That you're typically willing to pay up for it. However, having said that, where financial buyers are very helpful in a process is that they are very good with maintaining timing and keeping the first group honest, and also acting as a valuation backstop. And there's actually a third sort of group / option that we like to talk about, which you sort of mentioned subtly, which is standalone, right? You want your business to be strong and not sort of be desperate and have no other alternative or BATNA. And so, you know, having a good standalone case, you know, and you know, having a walk away as an option is the best for when you're in a situation like this. And so, you know, I'm happy to go into details with anyone if they have questions, but I'll just leave it there for now.
I will say historically, when markets are, public markets especially, but when economies are in recession or times are tough, historically, these are actually the very best times to be investing and founding companies. Like if you look at venture returns over the last 20 years, the best companies almost always come out of vintage years that are very difficult from a economy or market perspective. Now, on the M&A side, you know, I think there was this trend in gaming and esports that we were seeing a lot of consolidation happening. I think coronavirus is only accelerating that. Reality is there's a lot of companies that would never have survived on their own, could never have survived on their own. And so they have to join forces to have sort of a shot at survival. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think I'm not surprised that you have delays like on many of these Canadian RTOs. The reality is most of these probably should never have happened in the first place. You know, they were kind of lousy assets all bundled together. And if you told a good enough story, you had someone who bought into the hype. You know, the reality is some of those will still fly after this is all over, but most of them will go away. And I think that's a good thing. But definitely we're going to see a lot of M&A and a lot of consolidation, just not value creation type of M&A. We're going to see a lot of companies coming together hoping for survival.
Yeah, and on that point, in the .com bubble, that is when Counter-Strike, Super Smash, Zelda, and Halo were created. And then fast forward to the Great Recession in 2008, that's when Assassin's Creed, League of Legends, Minecraft, Zynga, all those companies were started. And so great games and great tech companies are spawned out of these moments. So Paul, I couldn't agree with you more. And there is plenty of historical evidence, not only in venture capital, which obviously we're excited about, but also in gaming specifically, which is really exciting. I think we all need to watch that because some incredible companies are going to be built in the next 24 to 36 months.
But it also has to do with cycles, which are standard. Like esports, gaming, and tech are following the exact same cycles. And the reality is when times are tough, the buyers stop buying, they stop spending, and it takes a year or two for that to recover. And then they're looking for acquisitions because they're looking to get competitive again. And in those 2 years, you've built hopefully enough value in your startup that all of a sudden you're the prime target because there was no one else building companies in those tough moments. Like it really has to do with very predictable cycles. And as long as you time it right, and you don't even have to be that right, you know, you can get out really good.
That's perfect. And I think it's interesting to see how, you know, trends are emerging out of, you know, with the coronavirus and how that's changing the some opportunities in the space. So I'm going to tap Ian from Pearson Yates on this one. But do you foresee more synergies between traditional sports and esports coming into light now that audiences, obviously more in-home viewing experiences, more of that kind of intersection, or other trends emerging in viewership experience?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think the one that most of us would point to is NASCAR and Fox Sports' partnership, and that's drawing over, it was what, 900,000 viewers according to Nielsen over there. So basic, you know, means of leveraging esports as a means for fan engagement for traditional stick and ball sports, and in this case, NASCAR. I think we're going to see more of that, but, you know, it's really when you look at the world, the interesting opportunities from an investment standpoint are really looking at, you know, within esports, that majors and world championships, which are intended to be played in person in large capacity arenas around the globe, requiring pro teams to travel and whatnot, have effectively been called off over there. And as we all know, you know, bandwidth constraints, ping lag and whatnot make it difficult to nearly impossible for cross-continental online play. So from a viewership perspective, perhaps this is finally the moment when smaller scale online regional tournaments really come to the fore as the lone option to view competitive content, whether that's esports or by extension, traditional sports. Now, I think if you blow that out to the logical extension of what does a new normal look like once we have defeated coronavirus, then we hit, phase 2 over there of trying to figure out how society and the economy and, as such, sports being a big part of that, adjust to it, right? So one of the more interesting data points I've read over the past couple of days was a survey conducted by Sports Business Journal over there, saying that nearly half of traditional sports fans say that they're less likely to attend fewer, they're going to attend fewer events once the pandemic itself passes. So really, when you put that into the context of what does this mean for our world, esports will probably recover about 2 to 4 months ahead of traditional sports. So that represents a pretty unique opportunity for us in the space. I firmly believe that during this brief window, esports will see a massive opportunity for viewership growth amongst traditional sports fans, just by nature of being the first professional competitive activity out of the gate. And really what we should be expecting from an investor standpoint is that you're going to see traditional sports team owners and leagues, many as who we mentioned earlier, have a cross-pollination and or vested stake in the esports world, to leverage that sort of brief window of time to test new methods of fan engagement, as well as integrations from sports gambling bookmakers prior to the resumption of traditional sports seasons.
It's interesting, Ian, and the group here to see the traditional sport athletes also now getting involved with esports, whether it's the NBA players playing an NBA 2K event or some of the NFL players playing Madden. That crossover is very interesting, and certainly we're going to start to see, from a sponsorship perspective, some of those traditional sport athletes being more engaged in esports sponsorships as well.
Yeah, I mean, my view has always been traditional sports is in so much more trouble than they realize, that they're on a steady decline towards death and irrelevance, and coronavirus is only going to accelerate that. And the perfect example was this NASCAR race that they ran on Fox and FS1. They had 1.33 million viewers watching a NASCAR race that was virtual on a linear TV network. And guaranteed 15% of the people watching had no clue this was a game. They probably thought this was just normal NASCAR. And it's not saying anything about NASCAR fans. Even I was fooled. And so, there's going to be an acceleration towards irrelevance of traditional sports and move towards more digital only formats. I think it's only inevitable. And the better the games get, the less and the better the VR gets and the better the technologies get. And I think that's probably going to take 20 years and we can agree on the timeline. But at some point, traditional sports just won't be able to compete, or most of their fans will be dead. It's one or the other.
And so I guess when we look at it from an investment opportunity perspective, and I'll kind of pass over to Garrett here from Falk Ventures in a sec. I guess with Falk Ventures, do you approach investment opportunities in a different way, or how do you kind of see the family office evaluate opportunities?
I want to respond to Paul's comment. And we've had this conversation before. I think it's a little early to call the death of traditional sports. I think, look, there's no question. And by the way, I'm the least qualified to be speaking on this panel. You guys are the experts. We represent some capital and some projects that I think are interesting. But look, there's no question that as a result of the coronavirus, there's a material benefit to esports. But when traditional sports comes back online, there's going to be a shift. And the community, the ecosystem has to be ready for that shift when all that attention shifts back to traditional sports. And to think that, that's not going to happen, I think that's a mistake. So if I was running anything in esports, I would think, okay, let's capitalize to the degree that we can on this sort of unfortunate series of events that is a benefit to us. And then let's prepare for when traditional sports comes back online and everyone's attention goes back to where they, you know, really truly feel like they have a passion. Now, look, Paul, look, 20 years from now, the world's going to look like a totally different place. I'm a believer that the power of sport transcends generations, and in some form, sport will be around much longer than our lifetimes and in the next generation. But we can have that philosophical debate another time. So in any case, so with Falk Ventures, we manage a portfolio of about 15 companies, primarily focused on sports media and entertainment. I think what's relevant for this audience and this conversation is we are in the process of launching 2 projects. One is an esports and sports betting accelerator, which we're currently capitalizing. And that's going to be based in DC. And we've got really smart people like Ian and Josh, who are our advisors, and others. And look, we identified esports and sports betting to be the 2 biggest growth opportunities for the next 10 years. And we want to identify the companies that are going to be a part of the fabric of those industries. So it's not necessarily the overlap of those 2, but esports on one side and sports betting on the other side. But someone much smarter than me yesterday said that there's so much pain being experienced by the traditional sports betting companies that this is really going to accelerate their move into esports. Just because there's nothing to bet on, and they're just losing buckets of money by the minute, which is sort of interesting and may sort of shift our thesis a little bit. But you know, in terms of how David is involved, David is a principal in this business. His legacy as a sports agent, I think, be difficult to argue that that's not sort of carved in granite. He's thinking about how he can have a legacy in the future of sports. We view esports and sports betting and this accelerator as part of that. And we're looking to sort of create the gold standard of accelerators, right? So it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with Techstars YC 500. You guys probably know them well, but you know, we want to do some things differently, and we want to add, you know, real differentiated value to the companies that come through the accelerator. The other project that is a little bit earlier on that we're launching is something we're calling the Pangea Cup, which is the World Cup for game developers, to democratize access around the world so that the world's best games, whether it's developed in the Ukraine, Bulgaria, Australia, wherever, we're going to create a platform so that these games can compete against each other in different categories, and then being played by the biggest influencers in the world to sort of decide. That one's building steam, but it's taking shape, but there's a lot of excitement around that, and we've got some great partners involved in that as well. So I didn't really answer your question, Reese, but I think that sort of gives a framework for additional comments.
I'm not sure if Paul or Stephanie, if you wanted to kind of chime in, if you guys approach opportunities in the market from a different perspective, or if you kind of have a different kind of put weight on different factors when looking at opportunities.
I'm just gonna step in just a second on the so I agree with Garrett completely. I won't call the death of traditional sport. I think it's a little bit premeditated. I mean, we're investor in sport teams as well. So, I mean, for us, even raising capital, it has been a lot easier than actually a most private equity fund. So that's mean the interest is still there, and we're still working on getting more money coming in for us. And so we didn't see that shift yet. In regards to also the psychology of human being, I mean, sometimes I think maybe like esport is so technology oriented that it also forget the human side of the equation. And humans are tribe animals. I mean, we gathered in tribes, and that's what we do. So I don't think that we will, I mean, people will slowly come back to gather again. I don't think it's going to be kind of a hockey stick type, but I mean, it's going to be kind of a slow growth again, and then people will actually go and see those sports, traditional sports. People also wants to expand their energy. So even if a lot of people are like right now in front of the television and in computers trying to play, well, I think that people will be so tired of being home that they will want to actually expand in some other ways. So for me anyway, I mean, I will agree with Garrett a little bit. I just don't think it's going to be an incredible shift from traditional sport to the esport. But I manage Athletes Money as well. I have a partnership with Morgan Stanley. I didn't say that earlier, but we have a lot of athletes as well that are investing into those platforms, and they really want to take part of it. They also see the future in what's going to be happening in the content as well, because I think esport is very content oriented. And then that's how I kind of see things a little bit shifting. It's just going to take a little slower growth on traditional sport to come back, and then the shift for esport, it's going to be a slow curve, but it's also not a zero-sum game. I don't think it's like, oh, well, we went from television to computer, so there's no computer anymore, right? No television anymore. So I think it's going to be, okay, well, we can cohabitate and co-help each other.
So I do think it's a zero-sum game. And the fundamental sort of core of my thesis is all of these things go away. Most of traditional entertainment, most of traditional sports, all gets consumed by gaming in some fashion. That really is the core of my 20-year thesis. And I call it the holodeck thesis because if anyone's watched Star Trek and has seen or understands what a Star Trek holodeck is, a room that can create any virtual reality you want and it's completely indistinguishable from the real world. So you can do anything you want in this room and it has all the properties of the real world. At some point, believe it or not, and this is the part of the prophecy, and they call me the prophet for a reason. This is the part of the prophecy that most people can't get behind. At some point, technology is going to figure out how to build holodecks. And I think it's coming faster than people think. I say 20 years so I don't sound totally crazy, but realistically, I think it's probably more like 10 or 15. And when that day comes, why would anyone go and watch a bunch of guys on a field, bashing into each other? You would never put your kids in real football if they could go play football on a holodeck. And I could have 50 million people all standing on the 50-yard line watching the game, as opposed to sitting in stands in cold weather in Green Bay, right? And the reality is the kind of experiences you can drive with digital products in that kind of virtual environment that are indistinguishable from the real world in every capacity, there's no chance for traditional sports or traditional entertainment in general. Entire industries get consumed by gaming. The entire adult industry gets consumed by gaming. And never mind sports. Like, sports is such a minor piece of this. It's the most obvious one that gets consumed. Education gets consumed. Like, you name it. Entire multi-billion-dollar industries all become some form of gaming.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I teach a sociology of sport course, and I've been talking about this for a few years, that our sport interest really focuses on where our society is. And as society becomes more technologically based, our sport interests are going to be in that direction of technology. However, I think the one thing that you're missing is the social aspect of sport. You don't get that in a virtual room that you get on a field, that you get in the stands. So I think 20 years may be ambitious. I don't disagree that esports will be the dominant sport, but I don't think we're ever going to see traditional sport completely taken away. There is something about hitting a ball with a bat, diving to catch a football, that you just can't replace in a virtual holodeck room or in a game. But I do agree that society is going to shift. I just don't think we're ever going to see it completely take over.
Well, you're not going to make love virtually to your wife, right? So it's the same thing in life, you know? I mean, you need that people need that physical contact at one point, you know, they need to expend that energy.
Again, this is where technology can solve all these problems. Like when I say holodeck, I mean solving for all your senses: touch, smell, sight, sound, mobility, you name it. And I don't see how anyone can argue that those activities fundamentally don't change. There will always be niche experiences. People still buy record players, right? The record player business is not going away tomorrow. People will still buy record players, but it will be a niche business. And as an investor, I want to bet on the big business. I don't want to bet on the niche business, even if it's 20 years away.
Well, the name of your book should be Gaming Eats the World. There you go. That's free.
I do. I call it the future of fun. So.
Perfect. And so I guess while we're kind of on the topic, looking forward into what the future may hold, maybe turn over to Jackson or Josh at Convoy. Can I get your thoughts? Where do you guys see the future of cloud gaming in general, or maybe even more specifically, the future of work in game development?
Sure. So I guess thinking about cloud gaming, because that's part of the future that will get us maybe to the realm that Paul is talking about. But I think we've seen a lot of growth in the last few years. I think it's been bumpy success. There's been a lot of investment. We've seen companies like Shadow, Stadia, right, xCloud recently, and there's been a lot of growth there. But it actually has a fairly long history, which is interesting in and of itself. But I think there's still issues, and I don't think they are demand side issues. I think there is and will be complete demand for cloud-based gaming. I think a lot of the problems are supply side, and specifically around technical limitations. And these are, the problems that need to be solved for, and what we're honestly excited about as investors. And so, some of the things in the realm there are edge computing, 5G technology, streaming improvements. And there's really various ways to achieve cloud gaming. And, I think a lot of the big players right now are going after what would be called pixel streaming, where, the game is being played on a cloud server, and pixels are being streamed to to your computer or to whatever device you have. But I think there are other ways. There's data streaming, which is arguably more efficient, a little bit more difficult to achieve, but more efficient. There's mixed approaches where computation can happen in various locations. And then there's also browser-based approaches, which I think it's essentially I would call it a different way. It's not really cloud gaming, but it provides the same general experience where the game ends up being played on your browser. But I think the question is, it's not so much will it come and how and when it's coming. I think the question really it's how it's going to happen from an underlying technology perspective.
Perfect. I guess maybe even just looking at, kind of different revenue streams depending on what model we're looking at in particular. And I know Neil, particularly from a collegiate esports perspective, like are there kind of different revenue streams that are unique to the collegiate esports ecosystem that will be attracting investors, whether that's today or down the road?
I'm not sure they're unique. I just think, again, you could take the traditional sport model and transfer it right to esports. I hate to say that our model is virus proof because we're all suffering right now. But again, we're running online events. We're planning a big GamerCon for September when this is all passed with our championships in our different titles in the collegiate space. In the different revenue verticals that we have, there's the sponsorship piece. There's the media piece, licensing, merchandise, the online and in-person events that we're doing, production, tickets, strategic partnerships. So, the model that we've built using, again, the traditional sport model, it it works, and it has worked. It's continuing to work. You know, the P&L that we've built out shows that 5x, 10x model, because colleges aren't going away. Even if they become more virtual because of this, the esports piece isn't going to disappear. And more schools are looking at esports as a way to generate revenue, to generate recruitment, retention on the college campuses. So esports is part of the fabric now. Our company is partnered with the two biggest governing bodies in collegiate sports here in the United States, the NJCAA, which manages over 500 two-year colleges, and the ECAC, which has over 250 four-year colleges. With the NCAA not being involved in esports, it gives these two associations the opportunity to take the lead. And what's nice about working and partnering with these governing bodies is we don't have the same NCAA restrictions that other sports have. So if it's a betting opportunity, we can do it. We don't have amateurism rules. Our players can go out and make money off their likenesses, off their images, that you can't do in traditional sports. And that opens the doors to a lot more sponsorship revenue and a lot more opportunities for our players to go out and compete in other tournaments and bring that credibility back to the college campus. So for us, again, Paul's not going to like this, but the traditional sport model isn't going away. And because of that, we were able to take the esports and kind of fit it right in. And we've built out a pretty successful business so far with a very expansive model going forward.
Awesome. And I think, yeah, that overlay between the traditional sports and esports, I think it's a good segue. We can bring in Ben here from our European perspective. Ben, it would be great to kind of hear your experience in the process of bringing in FC Bayern, obviously a very well-known club in Germany, into the esports world. So maybe you can kind of speak to that experience, maybe a bit of background about FC Bayern first, just to get everybody up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely. So over here in Europe, I think everybody knows FC Bayern, but just to give you a bit of background, they are the largest club when it comes to members in terms of soccer. Soccer is obviously the biggest sport here in Germany and in Europe that we follow very closely. And we have a few different customers that are from the traditional sports world. We have in the Bundesliga, we have FC Bayern as the biggest one. Then we have Eintracht Frankfurt, which we also built the whole esports unit for. And then we have a few others scattered around Europe. The process that we saw with those guys is almost the same everywhere. They're always very protective when it comes to their brand, much more so than in the US or in Canada, from our perspective. We saw that the US American clubs, they saw it as a chance to go into esports, as a new thing that came up. When we discussed with them, it's a lot of politics. So it's a lot of, oh, we're not sure what our ultra fans will say. We're not sure how it will go on and so on. So they spent 50,000 euros on questioning their fans and questioning esports fans if they actually want to see them move into esports. So they spent amazing amounts of money just on finding out if they should do it or not. The process with FC Bayern was about 3 years of actually talking to all of their top-level executives, having them. So I went to them with several different laptops and played League of Legends with them, played with them PES, FIFA, all of those different games. So it's quite a big process. Now they started, and what we see now, obviously with Corona, everything drops out. So a lot of people, and that coming back to the investment perspective from our end, also we see that they are very hesitant on moving forward right now because their traditional sports business is on hold, basically. So Bundesliga, first time ever in history, stopped doing any games, not even in front of a closed stadium, but really they don't play. What we see though is that they introduce some new forms of esports. So the actual soccer stars, they play in some sort of a esports format together. It's not the same thing, but it gives them some sort of a media attention. On the other hand, we see that others, again, on the investment side, so there was one big esports festival planned for July of this year. These guys were just in a big investment round. That one fell through because of Corona. The investor, who is actually from a traditional soccer club, said, I'm not gonna do it right now. I can do it in, I don't know, a few months, but I know that you guys will not sell any tickets right now. Even if you in July, maybe the crisis is over, but you will not be able to sell any tickets for 50 or 100 euros. So that stopped. What helps us a lot is that the German government and the EU gave out some public subsidies. So they said, we will help you give a bridge credit, we will give you a loan to move over and to be able to sustain your business. That is what helps a lot of these guys at the moment. But all the public investors, all the non-public investors that actually have to take care of their own money or the funds, they are very hesitant in terms of spending.
That's interesting. And I guess maybe when things kind of calm down, do you see other clubs kind of taking a similar approach, or what was your kind of sense in terms of the overall market?
I think that at the moment, still, even if there wouldn't have been any Corona, right? There are some clubs that still are very protective of their brand, that don't want to enter esports, that say, no, we can't do it. And some of those that have already moved a long time ago. And it's a very slow process in Germany to and overall Europe to move the bigger clubs into understanding that if they do it, they should not only do FIFA or PES, but they should actually go for some not sports titles that could be way more interesting when it comes to audience and so on.
Gotcha. That's perfect. So I know I want to leave maybe a couple minutes here in case there's any questions from attendees joining in. But I guess to kind of open it up to everybody on the panel here, if there were any kind of last thoughts, topics that you wanted to touch on that maybe we haven't covered here today.
Maybe for me, I'll just throw something out there. On the theme of investing, it's good to reach out to some of the panelists that you've seen today. It's obviously better to get to know the people before you need them. We typically, when we're doing M&A processes, even if it's inbound, you do want to have done your homework before you get the investors doing diligence. You want to have the answers to the questions before they ask them. So, from my perspective, hopefully some of the insights that I've given are helpful, and I'm obviously happy and available if people have follow-ups.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. So I don't believe we have any Q&A in the pipeline at the moment. So JD or Jessica, I'm not sure if there's any kind of wrap up. Any comments that are left?
So again, as we close, there's some questions. We still have a little bit of time. I want to thank everyone for participating. I think this was really great. Again, this is an evolving model for us. I can say that since over the last 6 to 8 months, we've made quite a few changes to try to make this as interactive as possible. So we'd love to hear your feedback on your experience, things you'd like to see different. We're very open to making changes so that everyone finds this more engaging. And with this, I'd like to thank again MMP for sponsoring this event. Without them, again, these events could not happen. I think it's quite insightful. So thank you again, Reese. And if there's no questions, wish you all a good day.
I have one just quick question here. Sorry, I've been late on that one, but thank you, GD. I've been approached. I mean, it's just kind of I love to pick up your brain. So I've been approached by the U.S. military to bring in like esports into their kind of stations or in their reserve. And then I was wondering if anybody has some thoughts on that. And I mean, it's kind of I don't know if they want to use that as kind of practice for eventually do a drone, or it's really on the side of like entertaining their soldiers and so on. So But I don't know if anybody has some thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear it.
I have lots of thoughts on that, but I'll do a shameless plug first. If you check out the Business of Esports podcast, we did at PAX an entire interview with a 3-star or 4-star general from the Army. In fact, the guy in charge of all of recruitment for the U.S. Army. And he gave a ton of his thoughts. Like, we spent an hour and a half with him, all of his thoughts, all of the plans that the U.S. Army had around esports. One of them, easily my favorite episode, and I'm a little bit biased, but like, the guy was just incredible, so knowledgeable. The Army has a real strategy around esports from beginning to end, from recruitment to retention to enablement on the battlefield. Like, you name it, they're thinking about it. And it's really exciting to hear about.
Yeah, I could expand a little bit on that too. We've had some experience with DreamHack and the Navy that are starting to take presence and have presence at the events. It's completely understandable why they would want it, because obviously the world is going that way from a technology standpoint. So it's understanding that they want to develop that in the country and have more people that are understanding of the technology and how it works. And at the end of the day, you know, it attracts a younger demographic for them. You know, as people are getting, as the younger generation's getting a bit older and they're attending live events, and you know, gaming has been around for their whole life. To target that market, they want to get into gaming. It's only natural. It's a hot topic, and whoever's not involved in it wants to, or at least is thinking about it. So it only makes sense that, you know, the government wants to start being involved. So I'm sure not just in terms of military, but the actual governments and states are trying to promote and get involved in these sports. Like, we're dealing with, you know, the city of Montreal, the city of Toronto, that are going out to find these developers so they can attract and bring gaming events to their city. So it makes sense that the government, the federal government, the Army, the Navy, and Air Force want to start getting involved in this to attract that younger demographic. So it makes complete sense.
We have another question here from Nicholas. With esports gaming being purely digital, why are we not seeing any solution using that, in fact, or in fact, of viewer engagement or even brand engagement? Any thoughts here?
Because everyone is anchored down by the trappings of traditional sports. It's literally it. It's pure human laziness. It's traditional sports has worked. Let's copy the model. It makes it palatable for investors. It makes it palatable for sponsors. It's easy. It's the easy path. And I don't fault people for going that way. I just think we're anchored by it. And so we're not seeing solutions because that anchor still exists. And until, you know, we get some people with a little bit more out there ideas innovating on that front, I think we will always be anchored by it. But I think that you've hit the nail on the head in terms of one of the major opportunities I see in the space, addressing that exactly.
I might just add that I think we do see some things. I do think, I agree with Paul, it's overshadowed by, I think, a lot of anchoring in traditional sports, but I do think we are seeing some innovation. A lot of the companies we come across are focused and thinking about how to improve and work on audience engagement. I'll do a plug for one of our companies, Muxy. If you want to check them out, they do some pretty interesting stuff around integrations on Twitch and allowing audience members to engage with players when they're playing. But there are a number of companies that are doing interesting things around audience engagement.
And Paul, I agree there is a lot of traditional sport anchoring there, but I'm starting to see a lot more companies creating this fan engagement on a digital side. And we've had a few meetings the last couple of weeks with them. So it's starting to come. I think, again, this virus has changed a lot of people's focus, and the smart companies are now figuring out how to get into the space through engagement and other opportunities. So while it might have been anchored, I think the anchor's loosening now because of what's happened.
I agree with that. And like I said, I'm happy to see that. And I'm participating in some of those. So I agree.
Any last question or comment? All good. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And again, if you have any feedback, we'd love to have it. And until next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure hearing from you and to getting your insights.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.
Good one, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.